what is your advice to people who might have a significant other, but they might not get magic? How do you tell someone about that?
Sure, and of course I think it definitely depends, with the person and what the relationship situation is to begin with. Naturally,
Sure.
if it's a friend or a roommate, and there kind of has to be that cordial thing. Sometimes you don't have to go into depth. If you need some privacy or need to do some working where you're not disturbed, you can relate it in a way where you don't have to go into extensive detail about what you were doing. Because a lot of people, it is true. It's regardless of our information age, one thing I love about the occult is that it remains the occult. It remains hidden, especially for people who are not really drawn, and their minds just seem to kind of skip over it. They're just not at the point in their lives or their incarnation where the subject is something that they can really latch onto. And I always find that fascinating. There's people in my family and otherwise that they're very open, but trying to speak about this kind of stuff, they start to get glazed over, and it's just not a good endeavor. But when I met my wife before we were married, we kind of went through, it was a very kind of humorous how we came together, and especially as we started living together and we were, began building a family and everything, the magical stuff took on oftentimes humorous, sometimes disturbing things, but to the point where she did really start to understand just how important and how real this stuff was. In the beginning, I think when we were dating and things would go on, I had gotten used to, even with previous relationships, that if someone stays with me long enough, if they're in my house, if they stay over, it's just a matter of time before something bizarre happens. Something moves off the shelf, they start seeing, a wisp of something moving across. And it's been my reality ever since, I was in my teens. I always knew that eventually I kind of have to explain a little bit about what's going on, the kind of things that I'm involved with. But my wife is a very no-nonsense, a lot of times literal, and just kind of speaks what's on her mind and dealing with things as she takes it. So it was really funny to see her kind of be exposed to this magical world of which she knew nothing about. It was a completely foreign thing, even about religions and other things. She had really taken a step back from her upbringing, not really having any great experiences with it. So nothing even related to that was really in her life when I met her. But things happening, even though I would try to tell her that, I've had these encounters ever since I was younger, and part of the things that I do is learning how to work with these energies to make sure that things are okay and safe. And, I tried explaining it to her, and she admitted, she's like, when I first met you and everything, all these magical things you were telling about, I thought you were mostly full of it. Is what she said. She said, I think she said, I thought the things you claimed to have seen were just in your head. And, I thought you thought you were doing this stuff and encountering these things, but, I didn't have any frame of reference, so I really didn't believe it. But, then things would happen and she would see it, and she would, what's going on, and then she would see some of the things that I would do in response to any kind of disturbance or things like that. So she, it started, she was like, okay, there's something here. And even though she didn't have any real big experiences herself until later, even actually before we were married, some of the haunting things would be so prevalent that she was like, okay, you need to take care of this and go do things. So it became a regular thing of any instances. I had to remind her when things were mundane and, something wasn't going on, because eventually she started associating so much with spirit activity or, magical happenings. And it was kind of humorous because she almost did a 180 as far as her outlook. And then she told me, especially her appreciation of this stuff really, really shifted when she began seeing the work that Ben and I were doing, especially together, and how when we were talking about things, we would have the same exact experiences, we would encounter the same things, and that the information coming out it would blow all of our minds. And magic for me is such a thing that, in our house, I have a room that is solely dedicated and used for only magical workings, and it is a necessity. It's a thing in our in our life, in our family life, where she's definitely accepted it long ago. There's no question that I have to have a space for this kind of working, because it's something that I do. It's not a hobby. It's not a mild interest or fad that I'm drawn to. This is something I've been doing consistently for nearly 2 decades, and even before we were married, it was something that I've always been serious about and I've always done. And she, luckily for me, has been very agreeing. And I think part of the reasons for that is because these things do happen, and she realizes that things could get out of hand if I wasn't here to kind of balance things out, make sure that certain things didn't bother her, myself, or the kids now. And that's a very important thing. And then later on, after my house spirit, after Hiram came in, she is very, very, very fond of him. Talks about him often, and each day or night when I go down to the room to talk to him and everything, she always wants to know exactly what he says and any questions or anything that she has for him. It's really funny to see, because he's a topic of conversation often in our household, and she's so fun. But I have to remind her that if somebody's there, not to accidentally slip up and start speaking, because they're not going to quite understand about us referring to a spirit that resides in the skull down in my magical room. So.
Right. And that is certainly something that magicians can certainly take note of, is obviously, as you mentioned, your wife and yourself going through this process of starting out where, and I know that my wife can certainly relate, where it's kind of like, okay, what is this all about, to an awesome relationship. In fact, I remember reading, and you touched on this briefly, and I can't remember if this was in one of your blog posts or if this was on a previous podcast, but didn't you mention that when you were looking for a house to move into, that your wife would actually go and check out the magical room space for you a little bit and say, oh, this thing this is too small, Brian. Don't worry about it. Let's go to another one. But that is awesome.
Yeah, and I'm like I said, I'm grateful, but she just knew it was a matter of course. It's something that is a requirement that couldn't be weeded out around. I mean, it's that important, and she realizes that, and it's nice to have the relationship that we do that way, where she understands just how important that is. And one thing she did write down for me when we were talking about this and musing over magic in our relationship is, she wrote down, she says, I never had issue with him doing workings because they served a higher purpose. He wasn't attempting to gain power for himself or just over spirits. She says, if a mage approaches their spouse or significant other with plans ahead of time, she said, that's great. Make plans, just like scheduling it. So if I have a big working, I try to tell her about it, and we
Nice.
Make sure to kind of plan around that. She sees the higher purpose in it, and the things that it's doing, not just for her family, but for other people. Even when I'm not doing workings, recording for himself, I have a lot of clients and such that come to me requesting this or that, and when I do those workings, and to see the benefits and see the changes that they make, for these people and everything, she definitely sees that as an important thing to do. So it's not just like a hobby, like working on a boat or motorcycle or something, even though that's fun, and I got plenty of other hobbies as well. But the magical thing is, it is one of my life workings. It's something that I do that's a part of me in a way to give back as